Hey everyone! Today we're going to be hitting on some pretty heavy stuff, but we're not going to be doing it directly. We're going to be talking about heavy stuff without discussing heavy stuff. So if you want to think about this as having a label, I would label it as a meta topic. Because really we're talking about hot button topics, and more importantly we're discussing how people go about discussing hot button topics, and even more specifically, what they do wrong when they're trying to address these topics. This all came up completely out of nowhere. I was actually planning on playing a song for you guys, and that's going to have to wait until Monday now, so watch out for that. For now, let's talk about what I saw on Facebook. Somebody posted a picture that was a graphic depiction of what happens in late-term abortion. It's graphic. And what happened is what always happens. It started with people saying things like, I respect your opinion, but the people who already believed that abortion was wrong jumped on board with what the picture was saying, and those who didn't believe that abortion was wrong, tried to respectfully disagree, but it escalated. And it escalated pretty quickly. But it ended with some sarcastic comments. It ended with people making statements about the validity of the other person's arguments in such a way that was very poorly handled, and the topic kind of degraded into very personal attacks. And I feel that the problem was a disregard for the proper etiquette of engagement when it comes to these kinds of matters. And there are a few general rules to abide by that can really help when it comes to this kind of thing. I'm going to discuss a couple of them here. I debated for 4 years in high school, and that gave me kind of the tools for one of my favorite things to do. I love having arguments about pointless things and about meaningful things. And it doesn't always come across respectfully, and that's unfortunately one of the risks. People are eventually going to take something that you say personally. And I try to minimize things as much as I can, and I've learned a lot in engaging in as many debates as I have. The first is a very basic definitional problem, and that is the idea of validity. Validity is a great word to throw around in discussions. To say that something isn't valid is to imply that there is no reason for it, when people generally have reasons for making their arguments. So to say that somebody's argument is invalid is usually false. We use the word incorrectly when that's not what it's meant to discuss. Now, whether or not the person is making the argument for the right reasons, or whether their reasons are firmly based in fact or in solid reasoning, is another issue. There we go past validity and into the idea of soundness, and whether their argument is sound and whether their reasoning is sound. Let's take that abortion illustration. It means it's supposed to make you uncomfortable and question what you believe. And I understand the reason for those tactics, but I disagree with those tactics for the same reason that I don't think that you should try to scare people with hell in order to make them a Christian. Emotion is not, in and of itself, a sound basis for an argument. That doesn't mean that if you're using emotionally based tactics and emotionally based arguments that you are wrong. What it means is your way of going about things is not soundly based, and people are going to have every right to say it's not fair for you to argue this way. That is not the angle that you need to be approaching things from. What most of that debate really comes down to is what you believe human life is, where it begins, and what its value is. But most arguments, even though they are about those things, cease to really be about those things. There are two sides to every argument, and it's important to remember this. There is a factual side, and there is an emotional side. And a lot of times, you're having two different arguments at the same time. If you are sarcastic, if you are snide, if you are making personal attacks against the person, you can be correct, but a lot of times the other person will still argue with you because you are attacking them and they feel that they need to defend themselves. At that point, idea-wise, you may have the upper hand, but emotionally you are using underhanded tactics in order to try to gain control of the conversation, to win points, so to speak. And the other person recognizes that what you are doing is wrong, and they will defend themselves from that. And the only valid way that they feel they can do that is by arguing with your idea, so that they're not losing to underhanded tactics. So a lot of times it helps to stop in the middle of the conversation and say, okay, are you upset because of what I said, or are you upset because of how I said it? Once you finish with the emotional side of things, then you can deal with the ideas. I think that it's discussed in better detail in one of Zay Frank's videos, which I'll go ahead and post a link here. It's a great video, but then again, I think that about all of Zay Frank's stuff, so do with it what you will. Now, I touched on something a little bit ago that I want to go back to, and that is the idea of making jokes. A lot of people really like making jokes in the middle of intense arguments because they want to lighten the mood. I have no problem with that. In fact, one of the most helpful things you can do is stop, take a time out, take a break from what's going on, break the energy of what's happening, because a lot of times a lot of things get built up and they snowball and then everything just, all hell breaks loose. So it helps to have that momentary break where you can laugh and then come back to things. What doesn't help is if a person perceives that that laugh is at their expense. At the challenge course where I work, we have a saying, and that is, what's funny on the ground isn't always funny in the air. So think about a situation where someone's climbing up a very difficult obstacle and they get stuck. And everyone realizes that it's awkward and it's embarrassing and the person is really struggling, and so they want to help the person feel better, so they'll make a joke to try to lighten the mood, so people laugh, people smile. But perspective is everything. And when you're 40 feet off of the ground, you're not always going to be able to recognize that in the heat of the moment. You're going to recognize, I am scared, I am frustrated, I'm very high off of the ground, there is only this tether and this rope that is stopping me from falling. Which, by the way, falling is a word that we're not allowed to say on the challenge course. We call that the F word. Dying is the D word. It's difficult to be able to look at that joke and say, oh, okay, they were trying to help me out. It's really easy to be discouraged by that, and so we try to eliminate jokes at people's expenses, particularly sarcasm. Sarcasm is a special kind of joke. It is passive aggression, and it is never helpful when there is emotionally charged subject matter and when someone is in an emotional state. When you are being sarcastic, a lot of times you are creating what's called a straw man argument. In any argument, you have to be careful of what kind of argument you're making and whether or not it's a sound type of argument. And one type of argument that is not sound is the straw man argument. Essentially what you're doing is you're building up a false image of the other person's argument, and then you are attacking the image. Let's say, for example, we're dealing with the abortion issue again. So somebody says, I believe that it's not so cut and dry as you're killing a baby or you're not killing a baby. What if the mother's life is at stake? Oh, so you're saying that the mother's freedom is more important than the baby? You're assuming that you know everything about their argument, and you are presenting their argument in this nice little condensed packet that's really, really easy to attack. To try to sum up another person's beliefs in such a curt, sarcastic, brief manner is never helpful to the conversation. If you're literally trying to understand someone's idea and say, so you're saying this, like you mean it in the sense of you're trying to understand where they're coming from, that's great. More people need to do that and more power to you. But if you're taking someone's belief and trying to throw it back in their face in this nice little condensed packet of incorrectness, chances are you're leaving out a lot of important details or substituting a lot of simpler ideas in to make their idea much easier to package and throw back in their face. It's wrong, don't do it. So that needs to stay out of the discussion. If at any point you find yourself tempted to make a sarcastic remark, stay away from it, because sarcasm is the enemy to any productive conversation. The big overarching theme of this is respect. In order to actually reach any kind of a conclusion, even if it's a conclusion of agree to disagree, in order to get to that point, you have to have enough respect for the person to be able to see that their ideas are valid. Whether or not they are sound is up for debate, and you can argue whether or not their ideas are sound from now until Kingdom Come. But at a certain point, there are certain points that your opponent is not going to be willing to concede, and you pounding that point is not going to change their mind. And what you're doing is detrimental to both sides of the argument. To sum up this video, I'm not going to tell you what my beliefs are, because I don't believe that it matters. If you believe that if I'm not part of the solution that I'm part of the problem, you have every right to think that way. And to some extent, I agree. But my point is, everyone has a different role in the battle. Some people are warriors. They charge forth, waving their banner and attempting to take down everyone in their path, and that is not my role. I can be that person. I could take you down, pin you to the ground, and make you listen to my arguments all day long, and I bet you it would not change what you believe in your heart of hearts. What's more important right now is that we find a way to talk to each other about this, or we're never going to get anywhere. That is my opinion on gay marriage. It is my opinion on abortion. It is my opinion on whether or not it's appropriate for black people to use the N-word. So by having good, open, healthy discussions, people can be brought to a point where their mind might be willing to change. A lot of times, my opinions don't change in the course of an argument. They'll change after the fact. After I've really had a chance to look at my arguments, to look at their arguments, really weigh them as objectively as I'm capable of doing. And a lot of times, I will say to myself, you know what, they had some good points. I might actually buy into that now. And so I'll look more into things. I'll actually sometimes spark more conversations with people to see how those words sound coming out of my mouth instead of coming out of their mouth. Whether or not I believe fundamentally that one side is right or wrong, if we're incapable of talking to each other about it, then we're stuck. And it's only ever going to be a war. There will never be resolution. I hope you got something out of this other than just me talking to myself. I hope this struck a chord with some people. I hope this made some people angry. I hope it did. Please post a response. But if you really fundamentally believe that what I'm doing is wrong, great. Tell me about it. But please do it respectfully. Have a challenging day.